I come to the floor today to request that we have unanimous consent for S 3313, which is the Women, Veterans, and Other Healthcare Improvement Act of 2012, which was unanimously supported by the members of the Veterans Affairs Committee to be moved out of this body today. Mr. President, this legislation not only builds upon previous laws that we passed to improve VA services for women veterans and veterans with families, but it also brings a new focus to the need for the VA to do more to help women veterans and the spouses of male veterans access assistance for one of the most impactful and serious wounds of these wars, reproductive and urinary tract trauma. Now, as many of you know, the nature of the current conflicts and the use of improvised explosive devices leaves service members far more susceptible to those kinds of injuries. In fact, Army data shows that between 2003 and 2011, nearly 2,000 of our service members have suffered those kinds of battle injuries. Like so many of our veterans, these men and women come home and look to returning to their lives, to find employment, and to start a family. Yet what they find when they go to the VA is that the fertility services that are available don't meet their complex needs from these injuries. In fact, veterans suffering from those kinds of injuries find that the VA now is specifically barred from providing more advanced assisted reproduction techniques such as in vitro fertilization or IVF. They are told when they come home that despite the fact that they have made such an extreme sacrifice for our nation, we can't provide them with the medical services they need to start a family. Veterans like Staff Sergeant Matt Kyle and his wife Tracy, who's here with us today. I'm so proud of her and her courage in making sure that this is available for families like hers. Staff Sergeant Kyle was shot in the neck while he was on patrol in Ramadi, Iraq on February 24th of 2007, 6 weeks after he married the love of his life, Tracy. The bullet went through the right side of his neck, hit a major artery, went through his spinal cord, and exited through his left shoulder blade. Staff Sergeant Kyle instantly became a quadriplegic. Doctors informed Tracy her husband would be on a ventilator for the rest of his life and would never move his arms or his legs. Staff Sergeant Kyle eventually defied the odds and found himself off that ventilator and beginning a long journey of physical rehabilitation. Now, around that same time, Tracy and her husband started exploring the possibilities of starting a family together, something that is a dream of so many young people in America today. Having children was all they could talk about once they adjusted to their new normal. With Staff Sergeant Kyle's injuries preventing him from having children naturally, Tracy turned to the VA for assistance and began to explore her options for fertility treatments. Feeling defeated after being told the VA had no such programs in place for her in her situation, Tracy and Staff Sergeant Kyle decided to pursue IVF through the private sector. While they were anxious to begin this chapter of their lives, they were confronted with the reality that TRICARE did not cover any of the costs related to Tracy's treatments because she did not have any fertility issues beyond her husband's injury. Left with no further options, the Kyles decided this was important enough to them that they were willing to pay out of pocket to the tune of almost $32,000 per round of treatment. Now, thankfully, on November 9th, 2010, just after their first round of IVF, Staff Sergeant Kyle and Tracy welcomed their twins, Matthew and Faith, into the world. 2 beautiful young children. And Tracy told me, and this was her words, "The day we had our children, something changed in both of us. This is exactly what we'd always wanted. Our dreams had arrived. The VA, Congress, and the American people have said countless times that they want to do everything they can to support my husband or make him feel whole again. And this is your chance. Having a family is exactly what we needed to feel whole again. Please help us make these changes so that other families can share in this experience. That's what Tracy said to me. Now, I've heard from these severely injured veterans, and while the details of their stories vary, the common thread that runs through all of them is that these veterans were unable to obtain the type of assistance they needed. Some have spent tens of thousands of dollars in private sector, just like Tracy and her husband did, to get the advanced reproductive treatments they needed to start a family. Others have watched, sadly, their marriages dissolve because of the stress of infertility, in combination, of course, with the stresses of readjusting to life after a severe injury, which drove their relationships to a breaking point. Any service member who sustains this type of serious injury deserves so much more. The bill I am here today trying to get passed will give the VA broad authority to offer advanced fertility treatments to the most severely wounded veterans, their spouses, or surrogates. And it also gives the VA the authority to determine how best to offer those benefits. It reverses this troubling barrier to care and will bring the VA in line with the military, which provides these services to the same group of service members. Mr. President, this is common sense legislation. It should pass without delay. In fact, the New York Times recently ran an editorial on this bill, and it said, "In more than a decade of combat overseas, the military and the VA have continually had to adjust to the challenges of new traumas with new treatments, as with the epidemic of brain injuries and post-traumatic stress. Adapting the VA health system to better meet reproductive health needs should be part of that response. It is one compassionate way to fulfill the country's duty to our wounded veterans." End quote. They also noted that even in this Congress should be capable of a bipartisan agreement to pass it, and I couldn't agree more. And I can't think of any reason why any Republican or Democrat won't join us today in getting this bill passed. This is about giving veterans who have sacrificed absolutely everything, every option we have to help them fulfill a dream of simply starting a family. It says we're not turning our back on the catastrophic reproductive wounds that have become a signature of these wars. It says to all these brave men and women that didn't ask questions when they were put in harm's way, that we won't let politics get in the way of our commitment to them. Mr. President, the VA has an obligation to care for the combat wounded, and that should include access to the care they need. And our women veterans deserve this, our male veterans deserve this, and our military and veteran families deserve this. So, Mr. President, my understanding is that the objections have been removed and that we expect this bill to pass tonight when we clear the bills as we end the session. And I want to thank all of our colleagues who have stepped up to make the reality of a family real. To these men and women who have served us so well in combat, have come home with extremely serious wounds, who, because this legislation hopefully will pass this body, and hopefully we get the House to pass it, will then have their dream of having a family become a reality. So, Mr. President, I'm very proud to have worked on this in a bipartisan way, moved it out of our Veterans Committee, and my understanding is we'll be able to clear this bill tonight and move it along its way to the President's signature and give hope to many men and women who served our country to have a family once again.